Hello, my name is Deb Kutska. I'm Interim Deputy Director of Sustainability with the Cook County Department of Environment and Sustainability. Thank you for joining us today to learn a little bit more about the draft environmental justice policy that we are proposing. We look forward to hearing your input and feedback on what environmental justice means to you and your community, as well as ways that we can further refine and improve the draft policy that's available today. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to read Cook County's land acknowledgement. Cook County resides on lands that have been home to Indigenous people for thousands of years. The Potawatomi, Ojibwe, Odawa, and dozens of nations were the custodians and caretakers of this land for centuries before European colonization. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building understanding and mutual respect across all cultures, traditions, and heritages. By reading this statement, Cook County recognizes the past wrongdoings as well as present harm upon people, tribal lands, and governments. We honor the Indigenous people, past and present, and pause to remember the acts of violence, displacement, colonization, and removal of the original inhabitants of this land. With this land acknowledgement, Cook County commits to learning more about and doing better to support the county's Native and Indigenous residents as we work towards equity for all of Cook County. So to give everyone an idea of where we're going with the rest of this presentation, I will start with sharing an introductory policy video that gives some background on environmental justice and what it means for Cook County, give you an overview of the environmental justice policy development and a breakdown of some of the key elements of the policy. And then we'll finish with a brief closing and next steps for you to share your thoughts.
Climate change is a complicated, difficult issue, and sometimes it's difficult for people to get their heads around it. Environmental challenges are not equally distributed across geography or across communities, and historically, communities of color have been more impacted by natural catastrophes and man-made challenges. I think we have to understand that government policy has allowed communities to be constructed in places that were unsafe for the residents.
So in the summer of 2024, our Department of Environment and Sustainability created a public environmental justice survey. And our goal was to collect input from residents and community members about what your top environmental justice concerns and possible ideas for solutions are.
The county has been a real leader on issues of equity and the environment. And I think our leadership now on environmental justice is putting those two together.
Ultimately, environmental justice is about the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of community members and residents, regardless of race, gender, class, etc.
When my daughter comes home and says, "Mommy, do we recycle?" Or "Mommy, why is it hazy outside today?" I realize that I need to be more intentional about my focus on environmental justice and doing my part.
If you are breathing high particulate air every day and you're not drinking clean water, and you are in a heat-distressed area, you're going to have a lower life expectancy.
I think the survey really highlights that environmental justice is a priority issue. It is an everyday issue for people across Cook County.
Across the county, the top issues which respondents marked as extremely concerned included drinking water for 58% of respondents, followed by safe and healthy housing at 49%, access to healthy food at 47.9%, reliable and affordable energy at 47%, resilience to climate change at 45.7%, air pollution at 44.4%, and having an industrial facility in their neighborhood at 43.5%. And in the open-ended responses, respondents confirmed that the top three things were air pollution, clean drinking water, and healthy food.
As a governmental entity, we can support greener infrastructure, we can plant more trees, we can focus on industrial composting to divert waste from landfills. There's a lot that we can do and push.
And we need to focus on what we're doing to create a better environment, a better planet, a better climate, a better world for us now, but most importantly for the people who are coming behind us.
And we need, as government, to try to help those communities address the challenges they face. Across the bureaus in Cook County, we're working to make our communities cleaner, safer, healthier places for our residents to live.
Thank you. Hopefully that video provided a little bit of background on what environmental justice means here in Cook County. And the link is available on YouTube as well as our environment and sustainability website. So as a brief background, we have been working internally at the county on environmental justice issues for the past several years. Internally, we've been trying to learn as much as we can about environmental justice, what it means in our region and what it means to our communities, as well as coming to a shared understanding for all of our departments and bureaus of what environmental justice means, and looking at other policies and practices across the country that have addressed environmental justice. The purpose of developing a policy was really for us to do several things: redress historical environmental injustices and promote equity across all of Cook County. So that's one of the key points, is that we are making sure that we do what we can to acknowledge, to learn about the different environmental injustices and environmental harms that our different communities are facing, and to see what role we play as a government entity in those issues. Part of this is to establish an environmental justice framework. So you'll notice in the policy itself that it is broad and there are not a lot of very specific policies and actions that are listed in it. That's because we needed a baseline. We needed somewhere to start that would give us a decision-making guide to help us as we evaluate all of our programs, practices, and policies. And we hope to see from coming out of that a list of number of actionable items and goals that we can make. This is just the start. So something key to remember is that this is our first step in taking part in recognizing our role in documenting and in sharing the information back with each of you. It was really important for us in this process to center community voices. We want to make sure that folks who have been living with environmental harms in their communities have been able to express those lived experiences and be part of developing the policy itself. It's also important to note that this policy is specifically for offices under the president. So even though that applies to a number of departments, it does not necessarily lean itself to the other Cook County separately elected offices and agencies. Another purpose of this document is for us to ensure accountability through meaningful community engagement and also transparent reporting. So setting goals for ourselves that we can share our successes, our progress, and our barriers with each of you as we begin implementation. And the document itself is a living document. It will change. It will be refined based on your input and your feedback, and it will also be adjusted throughout the years as we determine what's most important and what should be priority for Cook County residents. The document itself will be maintained by staff in the Department of Environment and Sustainability. So as a little bit of general background, again, some of the things that have already been discussed through that video, low-income communities, particularly communities of color, have been hardest hit by environmental harms. And those communities are most disproportionately impacted by things like air pollution, water pollution, land pollution, and also the impacts that come from living in industrialized areas. Historical practices in our area, like redlining, have had generational impacts. So even when we acknowledge that we have had practices in the past that we may have ended, we know that we are still working with families and communities who are experiencing negative impacts from those policies from years prior. And we also know that many times the community members have not been involved in decision making. So that's why it's really important for us, again, to center those community voices and have them be in at the beginning of processes before decisions are made. The environmental justice has roots here in the Chicago area. Many know Hazel Johnson as the mother of environmental justice. She is a keen example of a committed community member who noticed health impacts in her community and her family members suffering, and rose up and connected with other community members and neighbors to fight the injustices that she saw. And we build upon all of the success and the work that our committed EJ communities have been doing for those years. We know that there are a lot of formal environmental justice organizations that exist. Many of those are local, and a lot of them are centralized in the city of Chicago. So another important part of this process for us is making sure that we're connecting with residents throughout all of the surrounding Cook County suburbs. Again, it's important for us as offices under the president to address the fact that we have a responsibility in recognizing the role that we've played in environmental injustices, to address those past harms, and also to make sure that we're working to create solutions. The EJ policy itself has been supported in a number of ways by the Cook County COVID-19 response plan, and it's also one of the key recommendations from our Equity Fund Task Force. The Environmental Justice Community Advisory Committee was one of the key components for us in developing this policy. Again, it was very important that our staff weren't creating this policy in a bubble, but that we were really engaging with community members, representative of different groups across the county, to build and contribute to the content and the draft itself. That includes how it is drafted, the key priorities, and the different focus areas. As you can see from the screen, we had 13 different representatives from all across Cook County who have been sharing with us their personal experiences, their goals, as well as input from their networks and their communities to help shape this document. I'm grateful for all of the folks who've taken the time to have these conversations with us, to connect with their organizations and their neighbors to help provide this meaningful input. You can see that some of the members are representatives from formal organizations, and others are committed residents who are here to share their personal experiences and not necessarily associated with a formal group, but working with their neighborhood networks and their professional and personal relationships to help garner that input. So it's very important for everybody to know and acknowledge that this is a co-developed policy, that we are working hand in hand with our community members. This allows us to center community voices and helps us to represent some of the diversity throughout Cook County. That group was working hand in hand with our internal working group. So the internal working group has been very active, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, with learning about environmental justice and how all of the work we do aligns or intersects with it in some way. We have representatives from the Justice Advisory Council, from our Department of Emergency Management and Regional Security, Transportation and Highways, Economic Development, and our Bureau of Technology, as well as our Department of Public Health. Department of Public Health has been a key partner, as we know a lot of environmental injustices come along with negative or varying health impacts. So having them have a seat at the table and be able to share their experience and expertise has been really important as we shape our role. This group, again, was formed to engage county staff and for us to all learn about environmental justice. But another key point is that these folks help to elevate the community voices from our community advisory committee. So when we had internal meetings where our community advisory members weren't necessarily part of the conversation, our internal working group was able to pull upon the information and the stories that they shared to broaden the message that was received and make sure that county leadership was able to hear it throughout the process. Together, we framed an EJ policy draft, which is available for you today to review. So I won't read all of these in explicit detail, but each of them is in the document itself. These are some of the guiding principles that we decided upon through the EJCAC and our internal working group to give us a baseline from which to start building this draft. So one of them is the Jemez Principles for Environmental Justice, which acknowledge a number of points, but those include equitable public policy, self-determination, and participatory decision-making. Again, having community members centered in each of these processes before decisions are made and be part of developing the policies and programs is imperative to this work. Again, acknowledging that OUP provides and plays a key role in improving environmental justice for all of us, both by repairing past injustices and acknowledging how our programs may inadvertently cause additional environmental harms to certain communities. It's really important for us to acknowledge also that environmental justice pulls upon and is inextricably linked with systemic racism and practices of environmental racism. Again, we know that communities of color have faced disproportionate environmental outcomes and burdens, and it's very important for us to continue having that at front of mind as we're working forward and toward possible solutions. Environmental justice emphasizes community engagement, so you'll see that pulled out as a standalone segment of this policy in a way that we're changing the way that we work with our community members. And finally, a big part of this is education. So providing these resources and documents to our community members to allow you to share with your networks is one way that we can help build upon the awareness and improve the work that we're doing as we move to implement. So in the document itself, you will see a few action steps outlined. One of those is to continue the internal EJ working group. Again, there's always more work to do and there's programs to be assessed. It also has a commitment for us to increase staffing. So we're very grateful to our Cook County Board of Commissioners who approved allocation of budget for 2 full-time environmental justice staff that will be joining our department later this year. This will be huge in for us to improve capacity, to engage with staff internally, but also have point people to help with our community connections and ensure that we're reporting and responding to community concerns on a timely basis. We also will be establishing a long-term EJ working group that is comprised of external partners as well. So this current EJCAC that we are working with was brought together specifically to co-develop the draft policy, and we'll be learning from that to create the new structure moving forward of how we engage with community members and what that commitment looks like. Additionally, we will be developing public reporting and engagement processes and timelines. A big part of this is to make sure that you all know the work that we're doing and that we're transparent in our successes and our barriers. So that will be shared publicly with everyone. And a bulk of the work for the internal teams is that we will be doing a thorough assessment of different policies, practices, and programs throughout our OUP departments and bureaus to help us, again, identify those intersections and make recommendations for how we can move forward to improve environmental justice. Finally, we're looking at identifying an appropriate mapping tool that will allow us to identify and define EJ communities specific to Cook County. So as you saw in the video, there are a number of focus areas when it comes to environmental justice. It is a huge umbrella. There are so many different components and aspects of environmental justice. We decided we needed to kind of pull it together into main focus areas for this initial framework. So these topics that you see on the screen were pulled from the survey that we mentioned in the video, as well as our conversations with EJCAC, our focus groups, and our stakeholder interviews. And they include things like air pollution, community engagement as a standalone area, water, which is inclusive of access to clean drinking water, as well as things like flooding and infrastructure, transit and transportation, climate resiliency, lack of trees and green space, access to healthy food, and economic development and jobs. Now, in the document, you'll see in the second half, there's a chart which has each of these focus areas, and underneath them are bullets of either programs, practices, or questions that we have currently, and some that we can look to in the near future as we're doing our evaluations. There is a lot of work to be done. As we mentioned, this is the very start. So we will be working hard this year to get the draft itself finalized into a policy that we can put before our Board of Commissioners. And then we'll be working very hard on getting that staffing team built up, figuring out the plans and timelines for our reporting and our different support groups, and then working on how we can begin that full assessment of our programs and practices. So a lot more to come. And this is where you all come in. So it is very important for us that we're gathering as much input as we possibly can from our community members. We want you to share with your networks and your neighbors, your professional colleagues. What are your thoughts on the policy itself, or what role Cook County can play in environmental justice, either in rectifying some of those past harms or in creating opportunities for a better future for all of us? So there's a link on your screen, and it's also on the Department of Environment and Sustainability website, where you can go and access all of these materials, the slides in our presentation, the video you saw earlier, as well as a form that allows you to put your anonymous input for this policy. Right now, the public deadline is midnight, February 7th. However, we are looking to extend that likely through the end of February. So we would ask you to keep your eye on the website for more information and for updates, and to please share this widely. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, for everything you contribute to Cook County, and we look forward to having a policy that represents many of your needs. Have a great afternoon.